think Israel found a okayish balance because overall they're not all like one race of people. They're like Jews from kind of all across North Africa, Europe, and but they've kind of live in one very small nation, which is very progressive, very
Yeah,
modern, very open-minded.
I think the Israeli model is really good personally.
Yeah.
I think the nationalism is served their interests very positively. So I think Israel's a good country to emulate in many ways.
So like they do nationalism, right? So even and there's a lot of like lies people make up that they are sterilizing Ethiopians, but if you look at like the Ethiopian population, I think it went from 80,000 to like 100,000 in the space of like only a few years. So there's a lot of lies. They treat everyone equally there.
Was it not admitted that they gave sterilizing birth control injections to Ethiopian women against their will and without their consent?
Did
that happen?
The fact is there's like if they did, why is the population still growing so quickly? If it's true, if that's what's happening.
Well, if the Holocaust was true, why are there still Jews today?
I don't think anyone's denying the Holocaust. Like it's more of a case of the fact that
why are you denying the sterilization of Ethiopian women that I think was admitted, wasn't it?
Because when we take a look at it, it's okay. So people are accusing Israel of sterilizing Ethiopians, but they're clearly not doing a very good job of it because their population is growing and growing and growing. I don't think the Israeli government are that stupid just to allow their population. If they didn't want them there, they wouldn't allow their population.
Okay, you don't think they're that stupid.
If I could just interject, can we?
Well, I don't think Israelis are that stupid. They're pretty clever people. So
you're just generalizing about a nation. I'm sure
I'm making a generalization that the Israeli government are intelligent people. Yeah, I mean their ability to like their water irrigation is second to none. They're very clever people. No one can.
They won many wars where they were the big disadvantage.
They were surrounded by enemies and they beat like the surrounding Arab countries. Like then I don't think they're to be underestimated.
Them.
It's just fun. It's funny that you brought up the Ethiopian birth control and then completely dismissed it. I think there are many other crimes that we could accuse Israel of if we want to go there.
Yeah, no, they're not perfect. I'm aware that the IDF has its roots in terrorism. Like the King David Hotel, that was very much a terrorist attack. What I'm saying now is the fact that there are a very mixed group of people in there. They're accepting of everything. And I think when people talk about things like ethnic cleansing, so things like ethnic cleansing of Armenians, there aren't a lot of Armenians in Turkey left. The ethnic cleansing of
which Israel doesn't accept, by the way.
Yeah.
The clever Israeli government that you seem to be a fan of does not accept the Armenian genocide.
I don't think they don't accept the Armenian genocide. Okay, well, that's I mean, the Jews I've met seem to say no, it definitely happened. So,
I'm not talking about Jews. I'm talking about like
these are Zionist government. These are proper Israeli Zionist, pro-Zionist Jews. So they seem to be up to date on all the news. Joseph Cullen,
okay, the state of Israel, historically an ally of Turkey, does not accept the Armenian genocide. Now, you said they're very clever. I don't think clever comes into it when we're talking about morals anyway. But the state of Israel doesn't.
If you think about it, it is actually a clever move on the Israelis' part because first of all,
to not accept the Armenian genocide.
Yes, because consider this: Turkey is the second biggest army in NATO and is a very well-equipped country, especially when it comes to its military presence in the region. And as a result, you can imagine a country like Israel, in as much of a geopolitical precarity it is currently in, would not want to piss off a country like Turkey, even if they disagreed with them on the Armenian genocide.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, a lot of Western European countries, they just don't talk about it. They know what happened, but they don't want to piss them off because they're a trading partner and they are an ally in NATO. Now, I'm not saying that what they're doing is okay, but I'm just saying like, they can either expose them and just lose an ally, or just even. We all know what happens, so they don't need to like this. But I think going back to Israel, I think in terms of the people who have like achieved nationalism in the most progressive and respectful way, I think Israel has done that the best.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at
the expulsion of hundreds of thousands of the native inhabitants,
okay,
and a state born out of terrorism.
let's not focus on that.
That's your example of nationalism.
I think when you
Is that the example that you're following?
I made the point saying that Israel has a dirty past. I don't deny that, but I'm saying when we look at Israel today, you got Arabs in positions of power, in the Israeli government. You've got Arabs who are still Palestinians who are doctors and respected people and respected minorities in their community. I think
why wouldn't you?
Well, I think when we look at other countries, if we look at places like Morocco, if we look at other Arab majority countries, they don't treat Jews very well. I think there's the largest. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the largest, not Arab country, but Islamic country in the Middle East that has the most amount of Jews is Iran. That's got 1,200. They have Jews in parliament, but that's the best they can do. Everywhere else, I think in some countries they're not even allowed in. Jews aren't even allowed in. So it's messed up.
No, I don't think it's Jews. I think
that's
it's
your argument for why
it's Israeli citizenship specifically.
If the shoe was on the other foot, do you think the Palestinians would treat the Jews with the amount of respect that the Jews have treated the Palestinians?
God, no, definitely
I think
not.
that 750,000 Palestinians were ethnically cleansed and expelled from their homeland, and there are people alive today born in the town of Haifa who cannot go back and live there. But any Jewish person born anywhere in the world, whether they are religious or not, if they have one Jewish grandparent, can go in the town and live in Haifa tomorrow, and that's unfair. They can even go and live in a town in the illegally occupied West Bank, which is not even in Israel. And this is unfair.
So let's be honest with ourselves. Who would you rather have govern the West Bank, the Israeli government or the West Bank Palestinian government?
I think that people who live in a land should have one vote. One man, one woman, one vote.
Look, all I know is this.
That's what we want in this country. That's what we should have over there.
I agree with you. And I think personally, in my view, the best guarantee you can have of that, if I was a Palestinian, is to choose to be governed by the Israeli government than any bloody Palestinian government.
Fine.
Yeah.
Fine. So from the river Jordan to the sea, the Mediterranean, should be part of the Israeli state. Correct? You
honestly, I think
therefore everyone that lies within that land that is under the jurisdiction of the Israeli state should have a vote. One man, one woman. That's not the case at the moment.
Yeah, I think we could agree on that.
Not at the moment, but I think it's something that can definitely be achieved.
No. Israeli citizens of Arab descent are allowed to vote in Israeli elections.
Yes, of course. I am talking about Palestinians who live in the West Bank.
Aren't they? I mean, can you just simply...
Aren't they like a separate district? Aren't they a separate province? What about Arabs who live in Israel? Are they given a vote?
So, gentlemen, I'll break it down for you. You have Israel proper, which extends to the so-called Green Line, which was the line drawn up when the place was partitioned, and then they got as far as the West Bank, which was taken by Jordan. Egypt took Gaza, and East Jerusalem was on the other side of that line as well. In 1967, those regions were conquered, and Israel began transplanting their population into these regions in the form of settlements, which is an act of war. It is a war crime under international law, similar to the war crime that Turkey perpetuated in northern Cyprus when they transplanted their population into war-won land. That is a war crime under international law. So the people being poured into that region have the right to vote in the Israeli election, even though they are living outside what is designated as Israel proper, and they are living on top of or next to, behind apartheid walls, segregated areas on the Palestinian land that was designated to be part of a future Palestinian state. Those people are Israeli citizens. The people living underneath them and driven off their land next to them are not. Why not? Because they are not of the correct race.
Can I ask a question?
I'm a bit confused. I mean, you said they're illegally occupying the West Bank, but they're not in Israel because they're behind a wall that segregated them from the land that they are already on. I'm a bit confused.
When I refer to Israel, I refer to Israel proper, the internationally recognized green line that was drawn up after the Declaration of Independence in 1948. Behind that line, you have the West Bank and East Jerusalem, which was administered by Jordan from 1948 until 1967. On the other side, you have the Gaza Strip, where Egypt were occupying when the armistice lines were drawn. In 1967, when Israel launched a preemptive strike to capture these regions in the Six-Day War, they took those regions, occupied them, but never declared them part of their country proper, because if you did, you'd have to extend the right of every person living there to become a citizen. Instead, they transported their population into war-won land, a war crime, as we mentioned, and extended citizenship to those people, of course, who are of Jewish heritage, and deprived local people living there who are now under occupation from having citizenship. So if you're born in Nazareth or Haifa and you still live there because you weren't driven out in 1948, of course you have to be treated as a citizen, and you have a citizenship. Although interestingly, all you have is citizenship. You don't have nationality. Under Israeli law, Jewish is your nationality, and Arab
is that
your
so
nationality,
bad?
but you have a Israeli citizenship.
Is that so bad? I mean, if anything, like I said before, if I want to guarantee a higher standard of living,
You wouldn't like
myself,
it. Is it so bad? You wouldn't like it if it happened to you.
I wouldn't care. At the end of the day, my
Yes,
my
you
desires.
would. Yes, you
I
would.
genuinely,
You would
I
like
genuinely
that.
would.
Yes, you would.
Guys, let's wait a
wouldn't
second. Let me just intervene for a second.
I know you don't want it to be bad.
I've been keeping away for a little bit because I wanted to see what
Thank
it
you,
is.
Pablo. Go for it.
No problem.
Referee.
I'll just ask a quick question. Why would you like it, Chris, and why would he not like it, Julian? Why do you differ in opinions in this?
Well, I guess I'll go first. I mean, I would like it because the Israeli government has a much better track record of guaranteeing a higher standard of living for their citizens compared to the other Arab governments within the region.
Neighbors.
So, for example, the Israeli government is much more inclusive when it comes to participation in public affairs, public office, education, more so than the Arabs. You know, they don't racially discriminate between their citizens. But like any country, Israel reserves the right to discriminate against non-citizens. That's just
It has the right to discriminate against non-citizens in land that it has illegally occupied in an aggressive war. Why not extend this wonderful citizenship that you apparently would like, and maybe so would I?
Yeah, actually, I think a lot of people
on land that you control.
A lot of people believe that
I think they should be extended that citizenship.
Yes, they should. That's correct. They should.
Listen, a lot of people believe that they should just give them full citizenship. A lot of Zionists I've met who actually live in Israel say that, yeah, that is definitely something that we all want. We want to give them full citizenship and make them like proper like Israeli citizens. But I think when we talk about the Palestinian and Israel conflict, is if the shoe was on the other foot and Palestine won that war, how do you think the Arabs would have treated the Jews? Do you think they would have treated them with the same kind of respect, given when you actually know the history of the way Jews are treated in Arab lands? Definitely wouldn't. So, and I think of all people, the Jews deserve a homeland.
What is the history of Jewish treatment in the Arab land?
Pretty good.
When did this suddenly change? Where were 6 million Jews killed? Not in the Arab region.
No, I agree. Now,
I acknowledge
towards Jews and Arabs.
From 1948 onwards, after the creation of Israel, the treatment of Jewish citizens in Morocco, in Iraq, in other places was terrible and regrettable, and served to accentuate this problem and stampede more Jewish citizens out of the Arab world and into occupied Palestine to fill the land. And those Jews were treated as second-class citizens when they got there and lived in the poorest areas and lived and were ghettoized. And in fact, the housing in the occupied territories, I think, is cheaper as an incentive to go and fill this region. So these Jews of Arab origin end up living next to a hostile enemy, end up becoming more right-wing. There are actually the labor movement in Israel. Israel was something of a left-wing venture in the early days when they had kibbutz, where people lived in the true communism. You guys probably wouldn't have liked it back then.
I definitely wouldn't have.
Yeah, I know. These Arab Jews have ended up looking for a direction to punch down and want to discriminate against the Palestinians to reassert themselves that, well, we're not Arabs like them. A bit like how some non-white people in Europe and Britain end up becoming kind of far right somehow, so they can feel part of something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, yeah.
I mean,
I'm glad you're smiling, by the way.
There's a girl
I'm glad
in
you're smiling. You know I'm getting at. For example, Tommy Robinson, aka Stephen Yaxley Lennon, is of Irish background. And I think he grew up feeling not English enough. And that's why he joined the English Defence League. That's why Jews of Arab origin in Israel tend to be more right-wing than the white European Ashkenazi high IQ gentlemen, Jews that might have arrived left-wing when they did embark on the Zionist project. And if the Zionist movement had stuck to what the Balfour Declaration had been about, and it said it was going to be a Jewish homeland, not a Jewish state, a Jewish homeland that must not be at the expense of the local inhabitants, well, it might not have been such a bad thing, but that failed because it was very much at the expense of the local inhabitants.
Well, I mean, to be fair,
wasn't Tel Aviv bought? Hold on, can I just finish my point?
Yeah,
Tel Aviv was actually bought by the Ottoman Turks, and they made something truly beautiful out of it. They were great farmers, and they built a city out of sand. Basically, this is why. And I think if they would have just have stayed as just like, a little Jewish enclave, that would have been fine. But they went to war. They went to war, and Israel won. If they lost, they would have been just kicked off. The thing is with Israel, they just want this tiny strip of land attached to the Mediterranean that's no larger than the size of Wales. That's all they want. They don't want the entire Arabian Peninsula. They're not expansionists.
What I think some Zionists want are three things, which is a circle that cannot be squared. They want all the land from river to sea, Jordan River to Mediterranean, which, as you say, is not a huge land. They want it to be a Jewish state, and they want it to be a democracy. But it can't be all three, because if it's truly a democracy and you give everyone in that region the full citizenship, it won't be a completely Jewish state. It will be 52%, 53% Arab, i.e. Palestinian.
They want a tiny strip of land the size of Wales. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's not like the Arabs don't have
people living in that land are not majority Jewish. If you include everyone living in that land that they want, they are not majority Jewish.
Maybe let's consider this as a positive.
Yeah,
this is why they're talking about giving away places like Galilee and say, if you give us Kiryat Shemona or whichever settlement they want, we'll give you Galilee because it's full of Arabs and we don't want it. We don't want Nazareth.
Let's consider this, first of all. The land that was built upon that is now known as the West Bank wasn't really inhabited in the first place. So I see no harm in the construction of settlements to house new Jewish settlers. That's
really inhabited in the first place.
B, even if it was inhabited in the first place, don't refugees have a great deal of opportunities these days with regard to immigrating to practically any country in the world that can provide them with a much higher standard of living than they otherwise had before? So, for example,
you welcome that, do you?
Well, yeah, why not?
Are you one of these refugees welcome people? Did you put that sign up at the airport?
Welcome, guys.
In my opinion, if they're civilized, they can come. But it's
for 70 years. For 70 years, the Palestinian refugees have been trying to go home, to go back to where they're from.
But
and no one
why?
lets
It's a
them.
Well,
terrible. It's a terrible
should make
place.
peace. Even the Prince of Saudi Arabia says that you Palestinians, you should just make peace with the Israelis.
I
It will
wouldn't
just make
use the
everything
Prince of
easier.
Saudi Arabia
I know,
as an example.
honestly, yeah, I know that's a
to do
bad
anything.
example, but the fact is they should just they lost the war, make peace instead of just continue trying to fight an enemy you'll never defeat. You're an idiot if you try and do that. No offense, but
Well, let's see. Let's see
But,
how
like-
the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement gets on. Let's see how South African apartheid was defeated. Let's see what wins. Let's see what hunger striking can do, because there are many, many non-violent forms of resistance going on to resist what is happening to the Palestinian people.
Even if they got displaced from that land that is now known as the West Bank, okay, aren't there like tons of Arab countries?
Like, I'm not trying to be
No,
racist,
no,
but
like tons.
North Africa and the majority of the Middle East is Arab majority, and it's just this whole thing where people saying they're being ethnically cleansed, like they're being wiped off
Do
the
you
face
think
of the
people
earth.
from
It's just
Texas
not true.
would go and live in New York if you just turfed them out of Texas? Of course they wouldn't.
Well, Texas has got.
Do you think
tons
Morocco
of space.
has anything to do with Jordan?
So
or Syria?
let's
Do you
use
think
that
the
same
culture in
example.
Oman is anything like Lebanon?
Oh, I guess
Have
not.
you been to these parts of the world?
No, I haven't, and I'm not pretending to be an expert in it. But it's just the fact that when people try and say it's ethnic cleansing, and it's just not. It's like, I mean,
if you expel,
no. Isaac, can I just give an example? Like, if we just like ethnically cleanse like all the people out of like Wales, there would still be tons of other Celtic people in the entire British Isles.
Plus the Welsh won't care.
Especially the fact that the Welsh people already living there would still have higher standards of living than their Celtic neighbours. Like that's the equivalent of the whole like Palestinians living in Israeli.
Okay, so wait a second, guys. Wait a second. Let me just ask you a question to give some shape to this conversation. How would you deal with the current situation? What do you want? What do you think should be done about this situation in Palestine/Israel?
You go first.
You know what? Maybe just, I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's a matter of compensation. Just give them a citizenship of a country that will provide them a better off standard of living than they otherwise would have before. And I'm pretty sure these problems would evaporate just like that.
So I think that they should just give all Palestinians full citizenship, full rights, make peace, hug it out, and hopefully leave the past in the past. I know
Citizenship of where?
Just full rights that most Israelis get, most Jewish Israelis get. Everyone just gets treated equal.
Actually, that could be a solution to this.
Give them Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Job done.
No. Maybe we can move them to China.
Facts on the ground.
No. All right. What's your idea?
Xinjiang province, China.
No, don't.
Okay, Julian. How would you deal with the current situation in Palestine/Israel?
Well, in a way, as I'm not an Israeli or a Palestine, it's none of my business. But I would hope that the one man, one woman, one vote, democratic future that we all hope for would happen there. And since it's all headed towards being under the rule of one entity, then why not just have it as such? Have a dual national state. Call it Israel/Palestine or Palestine/Israel, however you like. And we can all benefit from the human rights, apparently, that the Israeli government is so good at dishing out.
I mean, it's nowhere near as good as the human rights Assad is giving over in Syria, but, one step at a time. No, I shouldn't know.
What do you think about... Well, we'll get there. We'll get there.
You know what?
I wonder why Israel.
This time King is debating soy boy, Islamophobe. No, I love Islam. I love Muslim people. I love the history.
Guys.
And I hate soy milk. I think it's disgusting.
There's an easier solution to all of this. Let's just give up.